Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers as we talk Seahawks football. Seahawks fans, welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with Keith Myers, and it's that time of the week where we're going to do our preview show. It's the 0-1 Titans visiting the 1-0 Seattle Seahawks. Keith, welcome in. Let's talk some Seahawks.
Yeah, let's talk about a football game that's coming up. That's, one of the fun things we get to do on the show. So, the Titans are coming off one of the more disappointing performances of week one. A lot of high expectations for them. Everyone was kind of ready to give them the division, like they were the favorites, and then they just got pummeled by Arizona. It looked awful on both sides of the ball. What do we expect for the Titans coming in? Are they going to return to last year's form, or is this what the Titans are going to be this year?
Wow. I don't know, because the defense is legitly, not very good. It was supposed to be pretty good, and their offense is all about, Derrick Henry running the ball, and then Tannehill just kind of taking care of the ball and not turning it over. And they didn't do a good job on either one of those last week. They got soundly beaten by the Arizona Cardinals. Arizona just went in there and just racked them. And Chandler Jones had one of those career days where he was like, you guys are going to give me a contract whether you want to or not. I'm going to put down 5 sacks on that deposit. So it was a shellacking. So I don't know exactly what to expect when they come into town. But before we talk about the game too much, let's talk about some of the transaction stuff that's been going on with the team. The Seahawks signed linebacker John Radigan off the practice squad. He was an undrafted free agent in this offseason and performed well enough where they decided to make that roster move. Indications are, I would imagine, on a move like that after this first game, that they were getting a little nibbles from other teams, maybe wanting to pick him off, and so they needed to make that move if they were intending to keep him around long term.
Yep.
And then coinciding with that, I think Pete Carroll came out in a press conference and said that Rashad Penny was probably going to be at least 2 weeks, if not longer, on that calf strain. And so I would imagine he goes IR. I didn't see a transaction for that today on the NFL wire, but it seems like it's a done deal. And then guard Jordan Simmons, who's on Seattle's practice squad currently, is looking to sign a 53-man roster deal with the Las Vegas Raiders, which is a good deal for Simmons. I don't know if there was a long-term role for him on this team anymore. And that gives them a chance to go up and make some money. And
it's a significant pay raise to go from the practice squad to the veteran minimum on a 53-man roster. It's a significant pay raise. Like he just
5 times, 6 times.
Yeah,
basically.
Sometimes it depends, because sometimes they'll pay more the guys on the practice squad a little more than they have to, just to keep them happy and keep them around. But yeah, it's like a minimum of 3 times as much.
Yeah, so you would, on a minimum contract, you'd be going from $150,000 a year on a practice squad, maybe, to $750 or so on a regular 53-man roster.
Simmons his service time's low enough that I think it's going to be more like 530. But yeah, he's going from it's significant. It's very significant as far as what he's going to make, and that's why players that are on practice squads leave. And it's not a loyalty issue. It's not a, hey, I'd rather play for them. It's, hey, I might get to play for them for.
Yeah, you got to take the opportunities in front of you.
Yep,
absolutely. So, all right, let's get into the Titans situation. So last week we faced the Colts. Colts were expected to be, by all accounts, second in the division to the Tennessee Titans. Tennessee looks like it was, had a pretty decent season last year overall, bringing most of the guys back, added some pass rushing ability to that defense to kind of bolster that a little bit. And everyone was kind of pegging them into as the number 1 seed out of that division, which isn't too difficult. But they look to be a 10-11 win team, I would think, on paper. And now they come in 0-1, a little bit hungry, a little bit embarrassed by their last outing. I'm sure that they've got some pride on that team. I would imagine we're not going to see the same team show up on our doorstep. So let's go over the roster just a little bit so we can have a baseline of who we're talking about. Ryan Tannehill at quarterback came into the league the same time Russell Wilson did. Running back Derrick Henry. We had a show earlier in the year about who's your favorite player that's not on the Seahawks roster in the NFL, and Derrick Henry was my pick, just because this guy is the epitome of a Seahawks style running back, where he's just a bulldozer and does a great job. AJ Brown is a wide receiver, kind of in the mold of DK Metcalf. In fact, they're buddies, know each other off the field. Julio Jones was acquired in the offseason, as well as Josh Reynolds from the Rams, familiar to those of us in the NFC West. Tackle, I only mention this guy because it's, he got railroaded, but tackle Taylor Lewin was the recipient of all those sacks from Chandler Jones. But he's a guy that we probably want to pay attention to because there might be some opportunities there. They picked up Bud Dupree in the offseason to bolster the pass rush, as I had mentioned. Janoris Jenkins, Elijah Molden, a local kid out of the Northwest, they picked up in the draft, and a familiar face in Bradley McDougald at safety was brought up onto the roster this week to face the Seahawks. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. There's not a lot there to me. It's not a very deep roster after that. It really tails off. And so I just want to get your kind of general thoughts about what you think, what kind of team is going to show up here.
Well, I mean, the team has talent. It's essentially the same team as last year that won the division, and is that, but they are it. But at the same time, they're different. There was a bunch of coaching staff turnover, especially on the offensive side of the ball, and so you've got different schemes running. And you saw Tannehill he looked like a different player, and not in a good way. And, even with Derrick Henry, who's one of the most talented backs in the league, maybe the most talented back is as a runner. So if you exclude, catching the ball out of the backfield and that kind of stuff, he only had, they only ran for 86 yards. So the offensive line wasn't just a problem in protecting Tannehill, but it was also just a problem in the running game. And so I don't really know. I don't know what to expect this to come in, because the talent is there, especially, at skill position players. You don't get a better 1-2 punch than they've got on the outside. I mean, Seattle likes theirs with Metcalf and Lockett, but the two guys that the Titans have are right there. It's like, if one of them is the best duo in the league, the other team's got the second best duo in the league. In my opinion. And so there's a lot to be real excited about.
Yeah. Well, they're two wide receivers, against our cornerbacks is a fairly decent matchup for them on paper, but I think it's neutralized, for the most part. As what happened with the Colts is our pass rush was just too much. Kind of overwhelmed their timing and kind of messed them up. And I see kind of the same thing happening with Tannehill in this. In fact, you had mentioned on the last show about, we're going to face a lot of teams and a lot of quarterbacks that didn't handle that pass rush as well as Carson Wentz did. Now, Carson Wentz, was just harassed and hit and pressured and sacked, and still really did, I thought, a fairly decent job considering all things considered.
He got the ball out of his hands quick. He didn't make the big mistake and the big interception. Right. He did his part. Tannehill is a guy with a good arm. He's pretty accurate. He's got a lot of straight line speed. So if he gets outside,
how do you like Tannehill compared to like a Carson Wentz? To me, they're kind of somewhat in the same basket, if you will, in the NFL.
They're in the same tier, but they're very different players. Carson Wentz he's bigger, he's harder to tackle, but he's not as fast. Tannehill was a wide receiver for most of his time in college. He's a guy that runs like a wide receiver, and he's a little more dynamic, but at the same time, he's more mistake prone and more. I think he's a guy that doesn't manage the pocket as well. Doesn't do those little subtle movements, sidestepping and things that you can do in order to step away from pressure and buy yourself that extra tenth of a second. He's a guy who's more likely to get outside the pocket, but once he does get outside the pocket, he does pretty well out there. So, they're different. They're different styles of player, but they're about the same tier of player. They're in that probably that third tier of guys that you can win with. Definitely. But they're not, they're not the superstars like Mahomes and Wilson. And they're not in that next tier of guys that are really, really good that can go win you games when your rest of your team is struggling, like the Staffords and Rodgers and Brady and a bunch of, there's, a ton of those guys, but or not a ton, but there's a few of those guys. And I don't think either one of them are in that class either. They're in the next one down. That they're more than just a game manager, but not a lot more. They're the Derek Carrs, and there's others in that category with them.
So on just kind of a superficial overall look at the way that this game is set up, it seems like the Titans would be coming in with almost the identical playbook in their pocket that the Colts came in with, as far as feeding the ball to Derrick Henry, their main running back, and then not trying to have Tannehill have to carry the load the entire time. And then on the defensive side, they want to limit our run. They want to harass and contain Russell Wilson, and force Wilson, I think, maybe to kind of beat them against their blitz packages and so forth. And we've saw in the last game that what Kyler Murray did against their blitz and pressure and so forth. I mean, they did pressure Kyler Murray. I think 25% of their overall pass rush was pressure against Murray, but Murray made him pay. And Russell Wilson is the same type of quarterback as far as handling pressure and making teams really kind of pay. So if you were the Titans coming into this stadium, what would be the game plan for you to try to eke out some sort of close game and maybe pull one out? Lost Keith. No vocal Keith. Okay. So my point is that I think that they are going to have some pressure to kind of keep up with Seattle again, just like the Indianapolis Colts did, in that they really struggled to keep it going after Seattle pulled into the lead against the Colts. They were just not able to kind of sustain or maintain any momentum at all because the ball ended up in Wentz's hands. The pressure got to him, and we were able to contain that. And I see a similar situation set up for this game, where I don't know that their defense has enough. In fact, this may be one of the poorer defenses we face early in the year, at least, overall on paper, where I think that we're going to be able to just kind of dictate terms on this thing. At least that's the way that it sets up for me. There's really no DeForest Buckner on this team. There's, Bud Dupree's, an addition, but it seems like with Dwayne Brown out there, we're neutralizing that. Shell's pretty decent on the other side. And the way that the tempo is set up with the offense, it's completely designed to neutralize guys like that. So to me, I think it's pretty set up pretty well.
Yeah. And I mean, what you end up with in that situation is you've got, they're going to come in and what are they, if you were going to beat Seattle's offensive line this year, it needs to be up the middle. It needs to be DeForest Buckner or Aaron Donald, crushing our center because our center's, the weak spot. Trying to get around the outside whether it be Dwayne Brown on one side or Shell with a Disley help on the other side, it's not the best way to get to Russell Wilson, but that's where the strength of their pass rush is. So the Seahawks are going to have an opportunity to do something with that. And, they run the ball pretty well. They've got some really good receivers. They've got a system that's designed to get the ball out of Wilson's hands quickly or to put him on the move. So that way he can, if it's not going to get out of his hands quickly, he's on the move and running away from the pass rush. So that way it generates time. He doesn't have to sit there and wait. So it really just kind of is, it's a good matchup, Seattle's offense versus the Titans defense. I will say on the other side of the ball that while the Titans offensive line is not as good as the Colts, like they're not on the same level, their receivers are significantly better than the Colts. So there is, if for somehow they can figure out a way, maybe they max protect, they keep in a back end, a tight end, ways to slow down Seattle's pass rush, those receivers are going to hurt Seattle's cornerbacks. The cornerbacks just aren't good enough. It's the weakness of the defense. And I think that everybody knows it. And so this is a matchup on the other side of the ball, where Seattle's defense and their offense, I'm more worried about this than I was last week.
Yeah. And then there's Derrick Henry. So you add that to the equation. If he gets on a roll, you're kind of in trouble. When the Titans get 100 yards from Derrick Henry, they're 21-2. When they do not, they're 6-12. So that equation is the equation. It is. You've got to shut him down first and force Tannehill. It's going to be the same exact game plan that Seattle put towards the Colts, and they're going to just try to do it again. And it made the best team win.
Yep, shut down the running game because that's where their best player is, and then force the non-top tier quarterback to beat you, and then pressure that
on the road,
road
with the crowd noise for the first time in 18 months or whatever it is.
Oh, that's going to be so loud. Like it's going to be deafening.
I hope so.
It better be.
It better be, right?
I'm sorry if you're going to this game and you haven't been able to go to a game and actually watch the Seahawks play in person in a year and a half. Get out there and be loud, please. Make an impact on the game. Just do it.
Nice. So, singling out a few of our players, what do you expect from our defensive line in this game? Their center's not great, and Ben Jones is their center. Obviously we've mentioned Lewin before, and a few of the other guys. There's, I think it's really set up really well for Seattle. I'm just wondering, based on the similar game plan, and maybe even taking a look at what the Cardinals were able to do effectively. What do you expect?
Well, I mean, the Cardinals are set up with a different talent in different places and a very different scheme. And so you've got Chandler Jones coming off the edge in a way that makes it really hard for them to give Lewin help because of the way they've got JJ Watt on the other side and just the way that they bring him. It makes it really hard for them. I mean, if they're going to, then it's going to be with a back, and they're going to pick him up, and you're going to try and chip him that way. But then that takes your release valve out of your offense, and so they didn't really want to do that. Seattle attacks in a different way. They attack a little, their defensive ends coming from the line, not from off the line, and they attack in. Within their lanes, although they do a lot of stunts and twists and stuff in there too. But they're a much more lane-oriented pass rush.
It also seems
off the run, and
it also seems like speaking to that, it seems like they do some bare front type stuff with Puna, Monet, and Woods in there, plus a heavier, 5-tech kind of player like Dunlap or Green or Collier. Collier wasn't in there last time, but they do that, and the reason that they want to do that, is that team can successfully penetrate the pocket as well, that lineup. But it also keeps guys like Wagner and Brooks and Taylor and Adams free to be able to, without a lot of road blockage in the way to make plays. And
they don't.
Seattle's kind of set up that way.
They don't have to shed blocks because they've been kept clean by the defensive line. Now, they can get pressure, and they showed last week that they could. I was a little surprised that they were able to get the pressure that they were using those bear fronts, mainly because one of their guards for Indianapolis, Quentin Nelson, he's an all-pro. I mean,
and he was the only guy that I really saw stand out on film too. I mean, he didn't have a bad game.
No.
They worked around him, but
he's good enough that he can make the people around him better, and it didn't matter in this game. Like, the Seahawks still beat everybody else.
I'm super excited. I have to tell you, early indications are that this defensive line is going to be quite stellar this year, just with the sheer number of combinations that they can put together and scheme wise move guys around. You've got a couple of asterisk players in Marquise Blair and Jamal Adams that just really are difference makers, that are able to just really be instinctual players. You add Brooks into that equation too. He looks like he's going to be a player.
Oh yeah. That guy, his speed stands out. I mean, he's a linebacker, but his speed that he plays with is incredible, and was fantastic in coverage, which was supposed to be his weakness, right? Coming out of college.
Unless you watched his junior year tape, then you can.
When he was playing on the outside, not in the middle. So yeah, I mean, you've got a situation where this, the team is. The team's primed. They're primed to have a really good year with that defensive line, and especially with this front that the Titans are bringing. Their offensive line is, like I said, it's just not as good as the Colts, and so Seattle's defensive line should feast in this game and be able to get a lot of pressure on Tannehill and be able to shut down. What's going on there, and with Derrick Henry in the running game. So it sets up for Seattle to really make it hard on Tennessee to keep this game rolling. So, kind of looking a little deeper on that. So, when I start looking at the way this works with Seattle's defense, I've mentioned already, my biggest concern is Seattle's cornerbacks against those wide receivers. And who does Seattle have that can cover Julio Jones? The answer is no one, because there's nobody in the league that can cover Julio Jones one-on-one, except for maybe Ramsey. And so it becomes a struggle. It becomes a challenge for Seattle to find ways to match. You're going to end up, double teaming and keeping two safeties back and that kind of stuff. It's really important that the offensive or the defensive line get pressure without blitzing, because Seattle's going to need their linebackers and their safeties and everyone back in coverage in order to try and take away those receivers. But if they can get pressure with just their front four, then it doesn't matter. You don't have to blitz. They can, harass Tannehill and really make his life difficult. And by having all the extra people back and still getting pressure, you're going to force him into mistakes, because those windows become pretty small. And it doesn't matter how good the receivers are if the throwing windows are that small. So and that's really kind of the Seahawks need that front four to push and really make everything work. And so that's really but my kind of key to for the Seahawks, their key on defense is they need to be able to get pressure with their front four without blitzing. And if they can do that, they are going to dominate defensively. And this is going to be true all year, where they're going to be able to dominate defensively as long as they can continue to push offensive lines around without blitzing. And so I don't know. Then if we look at the other side of the ball, I mean, they're going to have to blitz to get to Russell Wilson. And the key there is, as Bill was saying, is can Russell Wilson make him pay for blitzing? Because when you blitz, you leave holes in the coverage behind that blitz. And if you can take advantage of those holes, big plays happen. And that is really what Arizona did very well last week, is they just ran the ball when they needed to, but they really, more than anything, they just took advantage of those blitzes. They threw the ball behind it and ran up the score. I mean, this became a blowout fairly quickly. And so, that's kind of the key to the key to Seattle's offense and being able to do that, because they will sell out to stop the run with Chris Carson, but selling out to stop the run doesn't stop Seattle. You want to stop Seattle, you got to stop Russell Wilson in the passing offense, and that's easier said than done. And so, those are kind of my keys. And Bill ran into some tech problems, and he has stepped out, but and I'm not very good at doing this by myself. So I'm just going to wrap it up, and I'll wrap it up with a score prediction. So I think this is going to be a higher scoring game. I think that Seattle's going to put together a pretty complete game. And I've got them winning like 31-23. So it's an 8-point win, more than a touchdown, but still technically a 1-score game. But I do expect, at least one of those Titan touchdowns to come in garbage time after the game's been decided. So it's going to be in my opinion, I think it's going to be a fairly easy game. Seattle will jump out to a lead, then the defense will take over, and it'll feel a lot like last week, where they just kind of cruise to a victory. It's just a higher scoring victory than last week. Although I guess it would only be a field goal more for Seattle, but you get the idea. And with that, I will send you guys on your way. So you can find me on Twitter. I'm at Myers NFL. You can find Bill at NWC Hawk. You can find our show on Twitter at Hawks Playbook. Find us on there. Find us at Seahawks.com.
Hey.
And Bill's back. Hey.
How about that? My entire system completely crashed. Like it was nuts.
I was going. I talked about a couple keys to the game. I gave a score per prediction, and since I wasn't sure if you were going to make it back, I was just wrapping us up. So
nice. Well, what's my score prediction?
No, do you have a score prediction real quick before you?
No, I don't.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm completely unprepared.
Oh, fine.
But I'm going to give it to you anyway. 35-17 Seahawks.
Wow.
Yeah, we're just going to dismantle this team.
I have 31-23, but one of those Titan touchdowns coming at the end of the game at garbage time. So.
Wow. Yeah, nice. So that's basically a shellacking.
Yeah, either way. So,
yeah, nice.
If you like what you heard, please subscribe. Watch us on YouTube. Subscribe to us there. Hit the little bell icon so you get notifications whenever we post a new show, which is 3 times a week. So, and that's it. Anything you want to add before we sign off, Bill?
Yeah, just sorry. Yeah, I have no idea what happened there. I skipped 10 minutes of my life, and I'll never get it back. But I'll listen to the show and find out what happened.
All right. So thanks, everybody. Until next week, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NWCHawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.